Hi, this is Karen O'Brien with Flow2D Software, and I wanted to give you this video. Well, this video was already on YouTube for like 4 or 5 years, but I wanted to redo it because it's getting a little old. So this is animation mapping for a flood study that is flooding of a canyon, and then it's a breakout study. So what we're looking for is, are these levees going to be able to contain this flood regardless of where it may break out onto this alluvial fan? So it's a really fun and cool study. So let's start with a set of steps we have to show you how to set up the animation mapping for this project. I'm going to come back to this. I probably won't show it again, so maybe screenshot it if you want to keep your eye on it. But I'm going to keep it off to the side so I can see it. So now let's start with, how do you set up Flow2D so that it will give you this time series output data so you can do your animation mapping. And that's pretty simple. But you have to go to your control parameters, and you have to set up your time control. So first off, you want your simulation time to represent the data that you need to build your animation. So if that needs to be less or more than 24 hours, that's just specific to that map that you want to build, okay? Output interval is not super important because we're going to control the output with the time series switch. All right, so once you check one of these, you're going to check timdep.out1 or possibly timdep.hdf5. And once you check one of these, it's going to give you opportunity to set the output interval. We do for every 30 minutes because this project is for 24 hours, so we don't want a ton of data. And then this will be, if you don't need to adjust your start time and end time, just uncheck this. But if you want to delay the start of your animation for some given time in hours, or delay the end of your animation for some given time in hours, just set this range. I'm going to click it off because I want all the data. Click save, and then of course you'll export and run. Now, what that does to your control data makes it pretty simple. You can see right here, that sets that line in your control data. And what that does in your project run, if you go down here, I'm going to do TI really quickly on my keyboard. And that is going to give us this file, timdep.out. Now, again, if you have a really big project or you want a lot of data, use switch position number 2 to get timdep.hdf5. All right, next is to take a look at how we've defined and build our base maps. So your base maps in Flow2D basically give like a little bit of nicer colors or labels and things like that to your map. Let me turn this off really quickly. And so let's talk, what kind of base layers do you want? First of all, you do not have to map over your Flow2D project. That's not necessary. But I did it, but what I have here is my comp domain. Now my comp domain, I don't want my comp domain showing because I'm cutting half my project off, because I'm only interested in what's happening right here. But I need to start my rainfall and canyon flow way back up here in the canyon. I don't want to show that on my animation map because that zooms the whole picture out too far. So what we'll do here is, I will not do my comp domain, but if you want your comp domain, one of the things you want to do to it is take out that blue film that it has. So double click it and go to symbology and then select this one and then set this to no brush, and that way you just get the stroke color, and you can set the stroke width to whatever you want. I don't typically set a grid on my animation mapping because the grid is a very dominant feature and it's very difficult to see through the grid. So now if you have a very large open grid and you want that gridded feel, go ahead and use it, but I'm not going to. I do want to show my levees because they are very important and pertinent to this system. And I also added an open topo map, and I got that from this guy right here, Quick Map Services, OSM, and I use open topo. But I set this map, I set the transparency of this map to 15% to give it, I don't want it to dominate, and I don't want it to cover up my elevation, because my elevation, the open topo map has a little bit of elevation, but it's not very good. So by setting my own elevation, I can really make that elevation pop. Then I have 2 elevation layers. Now this is not, I don't want all this elevation data on my computer because this is a very large project. So that's a lot of elevation data. So instead I just connected to our elevation data. And if you want to learn how to do that, go find some YouTube videos on my channel to learn how to connect these to QGIS. All right. So I have two of these layers, and in order to, all I did was I made a copy of one. So I right click and I duplicate the layer, and that makes a copy. So the base layer, I just set the symbology to hillshade. You've seen me do that numerous times. I'm not going to do it again because it does cause a little bit of disruption of refreshing the map. So instead we'll do this one. Now this one is a little bit different. Okay, so on this one, on the symbology, you're going to set that to single band pseudo color, and then you're going to play with or adjust these min and max values until the map starts to look like what you want it to look like. Then you're going to pick an elevation color ramp. Now that's a little bit something that I've never really shown before, so I'm going to show it to you now. So if you click on the drop down menu, you can do create new color ramp. And this is going to mess, as soon as I do this, it's going to mess up my map. So I really do need to work through the whole process. We're going to set this from gradient to catalog and then click OK. Now we're going to set this to topography, and we're just going to click one of these topography colors that we want for our map. This one's pretty nice, and this one's not bad. That one's nice, and this is the one that's like specific for elevation. So we can go ahead and grab that one, click OK. And then something I didn't like about it is that I kind of felt like the colors were backwards. So I'm going to go ahead and invert the color ramp. And then I'm not going to make any adjustments, but you'll see that I may not have, like I may need to bump this up from 1400 to 1500. Let's see what happens if I do that. And then let's just click apply, and let's see what that does to the map. So that gives you, I think it's got a little bit too much red, and that's probably because my dominant elevation is around 1620. And I'll just go ahead and click OK and just accept it. We'll just live with it. And again, like that's why I didn't want to click that OK again, because as you can see, every time you cancel or OK, it has to refresh that map. But doesn't typically take that long. So back over on my list, the next thing is to add the mesh to the map. So the mesh is the Flow2D data. That's this guy right here. And I've already added it, so I'm not going to add it again, but I'm going to show you how to add it. So once you have that timdep.out file, you can go to the data source manager, put that on the mesh tab, and then navigate to the timdep.out file. Just going to go pick up that timdep.out file and click add. When it adds it to the map, you're not going to see this. You're going to see the base elevation. So what we have to do is modify our map and color it, and that's what I'm going to show you now. So, oh, by the way, if you import your map and it's nowhere near your project area, you probably messed up your coordinate system. So don't forget, in QGIS, you have to go to Settings, Options, and then you need to set your coordinate system, or you need to just check this button right here to use project coordinate system when the coordinate system is unknown. Now let's talk about styling this map. So once you select it like this, you can then click the layer styling tool. This is the layer styling panel. So it gives you a little bit more things to work with than your standard double clicking of this. And mainly what it gives you are these. It gives you this guy right here. This is code developed by Lutra Consulting, and they built this code for all kinds of mesh data. So here's what your map would normally look like when you import your data. And then this is your depth layer, but this is your time dependent depth layer. But if you open this up, you also have your maximum depth layer. And then you also have velocities, velocity vectors, however you want. I'm going to skip velocity vectors, but just so you know, you can modify your velocity vector colors and length and width to make them look a little bit more, well, easy to see. I'm going to leave them off because they don't really look very good on this map. But if you see, you have a style control for your vector map. So you can set that to 0.1. You can change the color. You can use a color ramp. You can do whatever you want on these. You can adjust the width. You can adjust the size of the head of the arrow. You have all kinds of excellent controls over these. I'm going to skip all of that. You can try those on your own, and I'm just going to turn them off. But what I do want to show you is if you're on the time dependent map, so this is the maximum map and this is the time dependent map. And if you go to the styling panel, you'll see that you can change the styles of the map. Now, if you don't set this minimum map, it's on a rainfall model, it's going to make it look like your entire base map is white because every cell got rainfall on it. So what we are going to do is we are going to set this to a minimum, and that's 1/10 of a foot, and clip out of range values. Now you might find that 1/10 of a foot is not quite enough. You're still getting a lot of colors that you don't want to see. So you can adjust that to specific to your project. Let's see, what else were we doing here? Now this is a color ramp was set to blue. I didn't change any of these other values. I did change this from continuous because the mesh uses 52 classes, which I think is ridiculous. So I did set that from continuous to equal interval, and I set it to 6 classes. And then I start from the low to high. Don't start adjusting these. Always go from low to high to make these adjustments, or it'll mess up your colors and you'll have to start over. And just put in colors that make sense to your project. And then you might also want to take out that 35 and make that, adjust that down to like 25 or something, because the 35 is probably a hole or something. I don't think we're getting 35 feet of depth anywhere out here. Now, once you have this ready, it's time to move on to the temporal controller. So any layer that has this symbol right here means that that layer has temporal control. So if you, let me just close this down for a second, and let me close that message. Now, if you want to see that temporal controller, it's just clicking this guy right here. And typically what you'll have to do is you'll have to click this button right here to sort of activate it, and then you'll have to click this button here to set it to the full range of data. And I've already done that multiple times, so I'm not going to do it again. And then, as you can see, you get what is happening every 30 minutes on this scenario. Okay? So if you need more data, you can set that to 1/10 of an hour output interval. If you need less data, you can set it to every 1 day. If you're doing like a 3,000 hour simulation, you might only care about what's happening every half a day or every day. So you can set it to whatever you want. It's going to default to minutes, possibly. Sometimes I see it comes up in hours, but usually it's minutes. And do not use these play buttons. They're too slow and they're completely useless. So always just the drag bar, or if you want to see it one step at a time, like that. Okay. That is the, let's see, I'm going to just, over here, I'm just temporal controller, modify the map styles, build the map layout, and add the time label. Okay, map layout. Now, when we animate this with the plugin called Crayfish, it gives you the opportunity to do your video over a map overlay. So we can get that from the Flow 2D Map Crafter tool. So here's the Map Crafter tool. It's a plugin. You can just load it onto your map with a standard plugin add-on. And you can see here I've already navigated it to our folder. And I'm not going to add any of these maps. I'm going to add a layout. So I made this layout right here. Let's go ahead and make it again. Let's just do open selected layout. And that's going to take a long time to render the map. So what I'm hoping is that I have one already opened. Yes, I do. Okay. So here's one that's already open and ready to go. But you can see that this one has slightly different labels. I didn't put all those labels in. Now you can modify this. You can delete this and put your own image in, or your own logo. You can modify this. I don't know why it says kilometers. Let's put that in miles. And you can set the scale to whatever scale you want it to be. If you don't want it to be like if you want it to be a round number, you can do that. And then I think when you first build this, your map space comes in with a grid. So I turned my grid off. Now, if you want to slightly modify the position of this, what you'll do is you'll go here to your map and you'll load what you want to load. And then you come back over here to your layout, and you will click this button right here. So I'm on map, and then down here in item properties, there are some zoom, pan, and refresh tools. So I want to click this very first one that set the map extent to match the canvas extent. And that will take your map from like the full grid down to the map canvas extent. Now, if you want a time control label, you'll do that with a label. So you bring this tool over here, add label, and I'm going to put this tool right here, or this label right here, and then I'm going to click on it. We don't need this. I'm going to get rid of that text. You can name your label if you want. Whoops, I already have one, so let me delete that one. Okay, you can name that label if you want, but what that label needs is a property called ID. And that item ID needs to be time, all lowercase time, okay? That's important. So then we'll save this layout and we'll save this as a template. That's important. Save it as a template, okay? And we're going to overwrite this guy right here and click yes. And also I'm going to modify this because not only is this this is the map with the levee. Okay, we're on this property, go to, nope, sorry, it's here. I just need to go to the top of it. We have the levee, there's no levee failure, and in this particular simulation there's no breakout. So the purpose of this study was to see what would happen to the flooding if the water breaks out of the active channel somewhere up here on the upper alluvial fan. So no breakout, no levee failure, levees are intact. And then we click, then we just leave that as is, right? We don't need to do anything with that, okay? Oh, well, I guess I can save it and then maybe overwrite this guy. Okay, there we go. Back to the map. We're now ready to export our animation. Now, I think there's a lot of ways to do this, but Crayfish does this so where you don't have to figure out how to use animating tools. So Crayfish does it all for you. That's why I continue to use Crayfish, even though it's got some issues that I'm not really happy about. And the number one issue that it has is that it's kind of slow. So you'll do Crayfish plugin. This is a plugin. You load it from the plugin manager, export animation, and it's got a Qt issue. So this is a Qt6 error message, but we're going to just ignore it. We need to start with general. The width and height are 1200. That's fine. That's just, you know, typical screen resolution. The start time you can adjust. I do adjust this width and height, by the way, when I'm trying to like do a LinkedIn post or something. And you can adjust your start time and end time. You can do either 3 or 5 frames per second. It's really not going to matter. And that might matter if you have like your output interval is a bit faster, then you might want to bump that up to 5 frames per second. But it usually don't need it. And then you'll navigate to your output and you'll overwrite. Well, I'm just going to overwrite this one. Click save and click yes. And then we go to layout. We want to use this custom layout. It's already there. And look, the label with the ID time will display the output time. And then we go to video and you can see we have high resolution. Let's see. I don't think these are going to happen anyway because we're using a custom layout. And then this goes to this is our quality. You can start with low to make sure that you like what you see, and then go up to best for your final product. And you can also see here that this is the program, the executable that creates the animation by stacking a bunch of images on top of each other and taking a bunch of screenshots and kind of patching those images together. And it's a really useful tool, so you can use it for all kinds of things, not just this sort of animation. And then if you want to save those intermediate images, you can just select that image folder and save those, but we're just going to delete ours after generation. So I'll click OK, and that will start saving those temporary files, and you'll see that this is going to be image number 1 is complete. And then as soon as it goes up to 3, image number 4 is complete. Okay, so it gives you that idea of where you are in time and how long this is going to take. I'll pause until it's finished. Alright, it tells you that the export of the animation was successful, so we can click OK. And now we can go to the animation, the location where the animation is, and go ahead and run it. And what you'll see is that's the Rio Grande filling up first, because it turns on right away with the base flow, and then the rain or the flood event from upstream. Now again, if you don't If you want to slow that down a bit so that it kind of takes a little bit longer, you can change that output interval and you can do more frames per second. So adjust it, play with it at a low resolution, and then get it out, export it at that final higher resolution to get a good video. And you can do that, as many times as you want. So you can see it's a really pretty good video right there. All right, that's it for the video. Thank you for watching with me.